Earthquakes! Biden warns Putin will pay a price for interfering in the 2020 elections. The EU threatens to halt the COVID vaccine export to the UK. Iran's secret underground missile city has been revealed. Israel discovers new Dead Sea Scrolls. The Knesset says that electronic bracelets are okay for people returning to Israel. And now Syria is claiming a former strike on the Iranian weapon shipments near Damascus occurred on February 28th. Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, Brother Wayne here from Alabama. This channel is all about world news and how it correlates to biblical prophecy. Well, welcome. Today is Wednesday, March 17th. If you're new to this channel, I would strongly encourage you to subscribe to receive daily news updates on what's going on in the political and how it correlates to the spiritual. Well, if you're a subscriber or you've been to my channel before, welcome back. Well, today I want to jump right into the verse of the day, and this is something that's very, very important that when we look at, and we're starting to see movement in the Middle East as far as new peace normalizations are going to be announced. Remember, on this channel, we've been looking for Saudi Arabia because that is the biggie. We've been looking for it. And we'll talk about it in just a second. But let's get right into the verse of the day. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 9, and we're going to be in verse 27. Now, to set the stage for this is the period in history in which the Antichrist will come onto the scene. And he will come onto the scene in which everyone will know who he is based upon what he does here in verse 27. So let's check it out. And he, the Antichrist, shall confirm or make stronger the covenant with many for 1 week, 7 years. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. You know what we get here? We get a couple of main points. One, that the third temple will be built. Number two, the temple will actually bring back sacrifices, such as it was in the Old Testament. And then there shall already be a covenant in place that the Antichrist will have to confirm. And when you start to see agreements in the Middle East, particularly with Israel, you pay close attention. So with this in mind, it's very important to note that just this week, Jared Kushner announced, and it was also announced by Benjamin Netanyahu, that Israel is looking to form a formal normalization agreement with 4 other Arab countries. One of these being the biggie, Saudi Arabia. So let's quickly look at it here. What does this mean? Well, this means that Israel would have normalization ties with the majority of the Arab world minus Iran. Can you see Iran being put on an island? So where does that leave Russia? Is there any talk of Russia being on an island? Well, just today, President Joe Biden, and this was from The Guardian, warns that, in breaking news right now, Biden warns that Putin will pay a price for interfering in the 2020 U.S. election. Notice there is tension there. Okay, so the United States is setting the stage for basically beef to come in with Russia. You already have it with Iran. So now we need action in Turkey, Libya, Ethiopia, and Sudan. Well, all these countries now are in the Middle East. They're in Syria, and they are waiting on the opportunity to invade Israel from the north. Can you see the stage setting up? Can you see the stage setting up that already has an agreement into place in which it will be confirmed, it will be made greater or made whole with the Israeli people and the Arab world. So be on the lookout for that. You know, when biblical prophecy comes to life and when biblical prophecy is right in front of you in the news, it's hard to even see it sometimes. So I really hope that you can see that all of these things are really falling into place. So now let's look at the earthquake report. And if you caught my short video earlier, I gave a little warning. There was a 6.6 earthquake in Russia. Yes, and that earthquake was 22.1 kilometers deep. We are watching that. So far, that's the largest earthquake over the last 24 hours. With a USGS magnitude 2.5 or greater, there have been exactly 50 earthquakes. Now, what I can say is that the aftershocks in Russia are 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, 4.6, 7, 6. You know, we're starting to see lots of these. But be on the lookout. Greenland is popping off with lots of earthquakes, and the Greenland Sea now had a 4.5 earthquake. So be on the lookout for it. Hawaii 2.7, Hawaii again 2.9, Alaska 2.8, Trinidad, California 3.6. There is lots of unrest specifically on that Pacific plate around the Ring of Fire. So major earthquake watch. We are looking for a major earthquake watch over the next 48 hours on more earthquakes, particularly around leaving around the northern part of the Ring of Fire, come up through Japan. You'll hit Alaska, and then you'll come back down on the eastern portion of it, which will be the western coast of the United States. That's when you'll hit like Seattle and California down into Mexico. Be on the lookout for that. We are definitely looking and having a major earthquake watch moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about COVID now. And so we've really kind of dug deep into COVID over the last few episodes, but this one in particular, this is from the Guardian here. The EU, European Union, has now threatened to halt the COVID vaccine exports to the United Kingdom unless it gets its fair share. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, what do you want to see? Well, basically what happens here is Europe now is saying that they don't want to give away a lot of the vaccine when they need it for themselves. In the article, it says the EU has received more than 300 requests for overseas vaccine shipments over the past 6 weeks and refused just one. Europe is trying to make international cooperation work, but you're starting to see that there are issues with getting the vaccine into certain spots. You even have some of the AstraZeneca vaccines, and several of those, and particularly this is kind of hurt this situation here, is which this vaccine has been pulled basically, and so they're starting to kind of go back in certain areas. In certain areas, it hasn't been pulled. But be on the lookout for this. We're gonna kind of watch and see how this plays out because that's just kind of unique. Well, in the midst of this, Israel, now you remember earlier on a previous broadcast, I talked about Israel with this electronic monitoring bracelets. Remember, what goes on in Israel seems to funnel its way across the rest of the world. And so the Knesset okays electronic bracelets for people returning from abroad. And so now you're going to see that the legislation was passed and it authorized the government to decide on those who can enter the country from abroad or from specific countries and who will need to choose between the options of, kind of what they can do. And the electronic devices are already been used for the purpose of ensuring that people do not break quarantine for several weeks. So now this is going to be, the bill actually allows private companies in Israel to carry this on behalf of the ministry. Can you see where now there's more watch? Can you see now where there's more supervision? Can you see now that it's beginning to be so technologically advanced as well as technologically monitored that people are going to really stick out if they don't take the vaccine? Can you really see that? I mean, in fact, there's been several businesses that have opened in Israel that will not serve or cater to those that do not have the vaccine. So you can kind of see that although that it's not being deemed as mandatory, it is being deemed as essential to have your daily operations or to have your daily necessities available to you. So, I mean, red flags, ding, 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 major prophecy alert when you see these types of things. Does it remind you of anything else in Revelation in which you must work all day to have enough wages to eat that day? Does it remind you of a situation in which people, they do not receive the mark of the beast, they can't eat, they can't buy, sell, or trade? Can you see similarities? Now, I'm not saying this is the beast system. I'm not saying that this is, the mark of the beast or anything like that, because it clearly isn't. This goes. So while we're still in Israel, a couple of big things out of Israel, and let's start with this one here. This was from Haaretz.com. Israel finds the new Dead Sea Scrolls, the first search discovery in over 60 years. And what was found was actually minor fragments of the 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament. And what was neat here is that it was in Greek, found in Greek, but the name of God was written in Hebrew. This is neat in the fact that God's name was written in Hebrew, which also goes back and tells you that some of the earliest translations of the Dead Sea Scrolls were in Greek with that offset of Hebrew there. So very unique situation. They also found mummified remains of a child in a 6,000-year-old blanket, and also a basket, a woven basket that is known now as the oldest piece of pottery or the oldest basket that's been found to date. So truth springs eternal. I mean, how can you not love that? And then now Israel, something that we'll talk about a little bit here, is Israel is going to their fourth election come May 23rd. And we've talked a little bit about it. We've talked a lot about different prophecies, and we've talked a lot about the elections and the biblical prophetic implications that it can have. Okay, and we're going to continue to discuss it. But this is from the Jerusalem Post. Benjamin Netanyahu, who's the existing prime minister, agreed to a Lapid challenge of a debate. They wanted to have a debate. And when you see Lapid's challenge, Benjamin Netanyahu agreed. They were going to get a moderator and go on to a debate. The opposition leader, Yair Lapid, who knows if the debate's going to happen now. I mean, we're so close. Lapid actually made this challenge on May 7th on Channel 12 there in Israel. But Netanyahu previously said he would only accept a challenge when Lapid announced he was running for prime minister. But now Lapid formally announced his candidacy. The truth has come to light. The election is either Netanyahu or Lapid, basically. There hasn't been a formal debate in Israel since 1999, and there's not been one with all the prime ministerial candidates since 1996. So this is not a rare thing. This is not a common thing. It's very rare. And when we see this, pay attention to this, because in a week, in 6 days, they're having their fourth election. And when you look at, the extra biblical prophecies of Jesus and Rabbi Kaduri and things like this, it really brings into something that's very, very good focus and should be a focal point for all Christians across the world moving forward. And if you remember on February 28th, and this is from the Jerusalem Post, a few details here, I talked about Syria, Iran, and Israel, where Iran is just really trying to get a stronghold in Syria. We've talked about this because it's a precursor or a prelude to the Ezekiel 38 war. Well, what has now just popped up in the news, if you will, is the last alleged Israeli attack, which on February 28th in Syria, the strikes were against Iranian targets. weapons shipments. So what you had is you had Israel attacking weapons shipments. And, you know, you can go back and look at videos on Twitter and things of the missiles and things like that, and then of some of the interceptors for the incoming missiles. But what you start to see now is that the truth is coming out. I mean, we all know that Iran is wanting a stronghold in Syria to be able to attack Tel Aviv, to be able to attack Haifa all at the same time. And what you're starting to see now is that there's no gray area. There's no gray area. It's one side or the other. It's the left or the right here. And what we're starting to see is that the truth of Iran's intentions is being made known to the entire world. And, you know, this is something that we're going to really have to watch moving forward, because it's all setting up for Ezekiel 38. It's all setting up for that. And one of the greatest things, and let me just jump over here to you real quick in Ezekiel 38, because I want to share one verse with you on it in Ezekiel 38 that I think is very, very important. And let me share this with you. I've shared it before, but Ezekiel 38 verse 20, and this happens when Gog comes against the land of Israel. Okay, so Gog comes against the land of Israel, Gog, G-O-G, and God, G-O-D, has fury that comes up in his face. And it says, God says, surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. That's 19. And then moving into 20 here. So that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field, and here it is, all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all the men that are on the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. This is a great earthquake in Israel, which every man in the world feels is a sign of God's fury. And it says, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. Make no mistake, when this Ezekiel 38 war happens, the whole world will know. This will set the stage in order that the world will know that God won the war for Israel. And when you go back into on 23 of Ezekiel 38, God tells you why and the results of this war. Thus I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations. Pay attention. And they shall know that I am the Lord. God is going to win this supernaturally for you, Israel. God is going to win this supernaturally so that the face of the Jew turns back to God during the tribulation period. But this will also set the stage for that covenant. Remember, there must be chaos before there can come order. Order out of chaos. Never forget that. Know that when this world seems to be falling apart, it is truly falling into place. And I'm going to ask you today, do you see these things happening in this world? Can you sense that something's not right? Can you sense that something could break loose again that could just turn this world upside down? Can you see it coming upon the face of the earth? I am a watchman. My job, my task right now, my assignment is to warn you that judgment's coming. My task is to tell you judgment is coming upon the face of the earth for every man, every beast, every woman, every child, you name it. Judgment is coming. And my job is to warn you so that your blood shall not be on my hands. But when you shall hear it, you shall be responsible for yourself. Are you ready? Are you ready for the judgment of God to come upon you? Are you ready for the judgment of God to come upon your house, upon your land, upon your city, upon your state, upon your country? Are you ready? There is a way through Jesus Christ, the Son of God, in admitting that you are a sinner, believing on the finished work of the cross, so that no man shall boast, but only boast in the finished work of the cross. And then you confess your sins to God. The ABCs of salvation is the only way you can get to heaven. Remember, Jesus said, no man shall come to the Father except through Jesus Christ. Remember, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16. Have you given your life to the Lord? Have you admitted that you're a sinner, believed on the finished work of the cross, and confessed your sins to God? That is the way. Remember, Jesus tells us, narrow is the way that leads to heaven, but broad is the way that leads to destruction. What path are you on? I would encourage you today to get on the narrow path, because remember, when there is a beginning, there will always be an end. Well, my time is up. I thank you for yours. Once again, this is Brother Wayne from Alabama, and Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.